This video is for 8.5 day 3 notes, and we're going to be looking at quadratic PVS equations. We're actually going to keep this lesson very simple, and if you look at the notes, you'll notice that we have examples without a middle term, we have factorable examples, and we have quadratic formula examples. But we are actually going to skip the factorable and quadratic formula, so we're only going to look at these first two examples that deal with no middle term. So before I show you these two problems, I just want to give you a little reminder of problems that we've seen earlier this year that are similar just without the trig functions. So back in the beginning of the year, we talked about extracting the square problems. And we might have had something like this. 4x squared minus 64 equals 0. So this is an example where it does not have a middle term. So we are trying to get the x squared by itself, so we add 64 to both sides, and then we would divide both sides by 4. And when we take the square root of both sides, the square root of x squared is absolute value of x. So absolute value of x equals 4, which means x equals plus or minus 4. So we're going to be doing this same process, except now there's going to be trig functions included. So as we look at number 1, we can see that there is not a middle term. We have a tangent squared, and then we have just a minus 2. So there's no middle term there. So essentially, we are trying to get the tangent of x by itself. So in order to do that, we're going to have to add 2 to both sides. And then we're going to have to divide both sides by 3. All right, so at this point, we are now taking the square root of both sides, which is going to give me a tangent of x equals plus or minus the square root of 7/3. So do not forget that plus or minus. That's going to be the most important part. Because we will get 2 answers for these. So since we are solving for x, we're finding the angle, we need to use inverse tangent. So you have inverse tangent of positive root 7/3, and you have inverse tangent of negative root 7/3. So those go in the calculator, and you will get positive 0.99 and negative 0.99. So those are going to be your 2 answers for number 1. Number 2 will be very similar. We notice that we have a cosine squared, but then we just have a 4. There's no middle term. So we are trying to get cosine squared by itself. So the first thing we're going to do is subtract 4 from both sides. And then we're going to divide both sides by 5. So now we're going to take the square root of both sides. So that's going to leave us with cosine of x equals plus or minus root 2/5. So now we're going to be typing 2 different problems into the calculator. We have the inverse cosine of positive root 2/5, and then we have inverse cosine of negative root 2/5, and those are going to give you your 2 answers. Once those go in the calculator, you should get 2.26 and 0.89.